Hello, and welcome to this workshop on a guide to scientific writing. So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that we attend university on the ancestral, unceded, and rightful lands of the Coast Salish people. So I have three main things to discuss today. First, what is scientific writing? Second, how to write a lab report. And for that, I will give you a sample outline. And third, how to write a critical analysis. So I'll start off with what scientific writing actually is, as well as your perceptions on it. So take a moment to consider your perceptions on scientific writing. Pause the workshop now to consider these questions. What do you know about scientific writing? What are some similarities and differences that you think of when comparing science to other disciplines? And where do you think the difficulty lies when writing for scientific disciplines? So please pause your workshop now. So scientific writing differs from other styles of academic writing, such as essays you might write in the humanities. So first, academic writing needs to be concise. For this, you get straight to the facts without any unnecessary language or descriptors. Sentences need to provide enough detail so that your reader knows what happened, but not so much detail that it gets overwhelming and hard to read. You can also use passive voice in scientific writing, but you usually want to avoid it in other forms of writing. So lab reports are generally written in the third person and past tense. In science, we try to use language that is impersonal and objective. We'll avoid personal pronouns like I or we. Instead, you use terms like the authors or the principal investigator or the team. So instead of we conducted this experiment, you would write, this experiment was conducted by our principal investigator. Science is a journey to understand the truth, so uncertainty is common in scientific writing. It's okay to be unsure. In fact, it's sort of expected. Try to provide suggestions for why an experiment didn't work out or why you got the results that you did. This is better than leaving the cause unknown. It's really important to address uncertainty and limitations and discuss things that didn't work out as planned. This demonstrates an application of your knowledge, which is the primary goal of doing scientific experiments in your labs. Lastly, scientific writing follows a specific format, including an abstract, introduction, methods and materials sections, results, and a discussion, and it often has accompanying figures, charts, graphs, and/or tables. So with these ideas in mind, let's look at how to write a lab report. So first, you need to consider the information, certain things that need to be thought of when you're about to write your lab report. So what is the purpose of the lab report? What information should you include? And what is the writing style and the tense? So we'll go through a sample outline in the context of a lab report. There are three main areas, each that have different sections, and I'll go through them in more detail. But first, you will have background information. This helps the reader understand the nature of the work and the purpose of the lab report. And it will include things like your title, abstract, and introduction. This is where you will have your topic, your purpose statement, and your central hypothesis. It will answer the questions, why are you writing this lab report? Why are you doing this research? Next, you'll have a summary or description of the work or the experiment, and this will include the materials and methods section and your results. Last will be your interpretation and evaluation. This will include the discussion and sometimes a separate conclusion. When writing your title, make sure that it is specific and descriptive, but also concise. Titles are often not complete sentences, but it is what the lab report is about. So state the purpose of the report. Your abstract is a short summary of the main ideas found in the lab report. It's generally between 100 and 200 words in length, and it should include the purpose of this study and any hypotheses, the procedures and materials used in the study, the major results of the study, specifically those that relate to the purpose, and any significant conclusions drawn by the author. The introduction of your lab report is a chance for you to hook the reader and preview the important details you'll be talking about in the later sections of the paper. So you'll want to start off with a broad introduction of the topic. What is known about the topic? This will include relevant background information and past literature in the area. You'll likely have a literature review in your introduction, and it will summarize the research that you've done on the subject, showing the reader your own knowledge and expertise. Next, you'll narrow down the introduction to talk more specifically about the topic you're investigating and why the study that you're doing is important. So this is where you identify which gaps in the research you intend to fill with your experiment or your study. You'll include an explanation of the techniques in your study. What will you be doing in order to learn more about this subject? And lastly, state the goals or purpose of the study, the hypothesis you tested in your study, and or the questions that you were trying to answer. After your introduction, you will have your materials and methods section. So this section serves to clearly explain how the study was carried out and which materials were used to conduct the study. It'll provide the information by which the validity of the study can be judged, and so that the study can be replicated. That means that this section requires a clear and precise description of how the experiment was done. Writing here needs to be specific enough so that someone could hypothetically repeat your experiment. The materials and methods should also provide a rationale for why you chose the specific procedures that you did. So this section, the materials and methods section, is often the easiest part of a lab report to write because the procedure is either written in your lab manual or you took notes on the procedure as you perform the study. Just when writing it, make sure to write it in paragraph form with complete sentences rather than just a bulleted list of your methods, unless of course your instructor is fine with having bullet points. There are specific stylistic elements that you can use in this, in the materials and methods section. To be more concise, you can use the active voice to a certain extent, but continue to avoid first person. This section should be in past tense, but as should all of your lab report. And then make sure that the materials and methods section is organized linearly in an orderly fashion. Step 1 precedes step 2, which is followed by step 3. The materials and methods section should answer these questions. How was the research question answered? So that is specifically what was done in order to obtain an answer to the question that you asked in your introduction. How was this done? Is the experimental design justified? So that means you'll need to explain why you chose to organize your experiment the way that you did. And how were the results analyzed? So for example, what statistical methods were used? Remember that the materials and methods section should not include any of your results. That's what the results section is for. The materials and methods section should include only what you did. Your experimental design should be described with enough detail that anyone would be able to follow your procedures to repeat your work in order to verify your findings. So you will need to include a straightforward explanation of the hypothesis tests, so what controls, treatments, and variables were measured, the number of replicates, what was actually measured, and the form in which the data were collected. When writing your results section, it should be straightforward and to the point. So this section is not about meaning. This is not the place to explain what the results mean or the significance of your findings or provide any sort of interpretation. It is just your findings. So the results section will state exactly what the reader is looking at. Write simply and plainly. You want to limit any interpretation and thus potential misinterpretation from the reader. So your results should be sequenced in a way to structure a story or narrative of the discussion, which comes later. The majority of your figures, graphs, tables, and charts, etc., will appear in the results section. Notice how specific and to the point this figure caption is. It states exactly what you're looking at with no filler. The information in this caption would appear in the text as well, but there should also be enough information in the caption so that the image can stand alone. So figures and tables can help to explain your results. They need to be easy to read because they can convey a lot of information to the reader in a simplified and efficient way. They need to be self-explanatory and include enough information to be able to stand alone without reading the entire paper. And then anytime you mention a figure, a table, or whatever, you need to mention it in the text. So there are two ways to do this. You can mention the figure directly in the line of text. So for example, figure 1 shows this, or you can add a citation in parentheses at the end of the sentence. So you can see the examples here of how that is done. Once you've written your results, you will write your discussion. So the discussion is where you get to tell the story of your research. Besides the figures and tables, it's the most creative part of your paper. So your discussion will follow the progression of the results and will interpret your findings. Don't just restate your results. You need to talk about why they're significant and important. You also want to highlight any inconsistencies and compare your results to those from the other studies that you discussed in your literature review in the introduction. Are your findings consistent with previous research? Why or why not? You'll want to explain why you performed the experiments and how the results you obtained take you and your reader closer to the conclusion. Remember, address any uncertainty. Were there any limitations to your design? Any results that can't be explained? It's better to address these even if you can't fully explain them than it is to leave them for your reader to interpret or misinterpret. Then end with future directions for research. Your research question may have filled a gap, but in answering that question, you likely created 5 more questions that now need answering. And explain overall how your experiment or research advanced understanding of the subject. Another form of scientific writing is a critical analysis. You might need to write a critical analysis on another researcher's experiment. So, a critical analysis will evaluate someone else's work so that you can increase the reader's understanding of it. You'll discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the article's ideas and content. Your analysis will include a description, analysis, and interpretation that will allow your reader to assess the original article's value. Now, compared to writing a lab report, which is objective, here you will be subjective. You are evaluating the text, so you'll be expressing your opinion. All right, thank you for listening to this workshop on scientific writing. And you can come see us if you have any more questions. There are student learning commons located in on every SFU campus and the library. We'd be happy to come chat with you.